come 2019, and every real estate agent or developer was optimistic about the real estate industry. The market looked bullish, not just in India, but globally as well. Cut to 2021, and the pandemic swept through the entire planet, decimating industries and global commerce. It has perhaps brought in numerous changes in the real estate market too. From changed home buying patterns to people no longer gravitating exclusively towards IT hubs in the metros to proximity of the workplace no longer being a big question, the past year introduced paradigm shifts for everyone associated with this industry. Throwing light on the above, I have with me Karan Kumar, Chief Marketing Officer at DLF, walking us through the new realities in the real estate sector. We welcome you, Karan.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Soumya, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here.
Okay, Karan. So you've been a very high impact marketer all these years who's built businesses through the creation of powerful brands across sectors. I'm very intrigued to know how have you utilized your past experience in this real estate giant called DLF?
See, it's a very interesting aspect because, when you come from the kind of varied background that I come from, I've come across, from consumer packaged goods to stationery to lifestyle to retail to now real estate. I think what it does do is that it really helps you to enter any new sector and any new industry with a fresh set of eyes, with fresher perspectives, and with a much broader set of experience and horizons that you've already kind of traversed. So if anything, you end up bringing in a lot of your previous understanding, experiences, expertise, if I can say so, into the new area of work that you come in. And that's honestly one of the reasons why some of the organizations like DLF in real estate and outside of real estate and other sectors as well hire people who come from a non-traditional background. When I say non-traditional is, from outside the industry. Because, at the end of the day, while the industries change and the sectors change, a couple of things don't change. And they remain constant and they remain consistent. Your ability and your appreciation of challenges which revolve a scalable business, your appreciation of challenges around cash flows, your appreciation of challenges around profitability, your appreciation of challenges around inventory management, sales systems and processes. Some of these things kind of remain consistent themes cutting across whichever industry you're working in from one point of time to the other, right? I've also had an experience of working when I was with ITC across multiple sectors and industries as part of the same organization. And some were slightly more nascent, some were slightly more mature businesses. So I think all of that is something that you bring to the table when you join a new ecosystem. And as I said, the fundamentals remain pretty much the same. I think at the core of everything that you do as a marketing business leader, I think the core always remains anchored in your attempt, at least my core, I speak for myself, not for everybody else, but my core is always anchored in building a more powerful brand than it currently is today, a brand that is trusted by its customers and its ecosystem, and a brand that engineers advocacy amongst its current set of stakeholders. So, for me, those are constants, and irrespective of whichever industry I work with or work in, I think those things kind of flow through seamlessly.
Right, very well said. So Karan, my next question is, the reverberations of the pandemic were of course felt across sectors. So what has been its impact on the real estate sector? If you could just give me a sense of how it impacted affordable housing, premium housing and the commercial spaces.
I think whenever there is a seismic change where there is a lot of uncertainty and there is a lot of mistrust and a sense of apprehension, people invariably gravitate in their choices across sectors and across categories towards brands that they can trust, towards brands that hold a certain meaning in their lives. And with the pandemic, I think that sense of apprehension that even you and I as normal ordinary people, right, forget ourselves as being a part of either the real estate world, or you and I at the end of the day are very normal people and we buy very normal things, right?
Right.
Some things are definitely more expensive than the other things. Some things we buy more frequently. Some things we might end up buying once in our lifetime. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I think when we are apprehensive, we want to stick to brands that we can trust. We
Right.
want to stick to brands who have a certain commitment, a certain legacy, a certain history for delivering on what has been committed.
Yeah.
And I think real estate is no different. If anything, given the ticket sizes that are involved, uh, that that requirement comes to the fore even more strongly. But purely from a real estate point of view, I think again, counterintuitively, both you and I will understand that when people start working from home, people want a slightly bigger space. People want a little extra half room or a slightly bigger balcony, or an extra little space which can have flexible multiple usages. It could be used as your kid's study room at some point of time in the day, to your working room at some point of the time in the day, to, let's say, your mother's tuition room if she's doing tuitions at some point of time.
Yeah.
So everybody wants a little bit extra space. Everybody wants a little bit of flexible space that can be used in for multiple reasons and multiple choices.
Yeah.
The other thing outside of this extra space kind of a requirement is also, I think, the pandemic told us that
Mm.
work life at some point of time can be geography agnostic.
Mm. Right.
And if it was geography, work from anywhere literally, then people wanted to indulge a little bit more and see that, can I move away from city life into somewhere which is slightly less chaotic. It could be the hills, it could be the beach, it could be, whatever you like. But this entire concept of an alternate home, no longer a luxury holiday home. There was a time when this alternate as a luxury alternate kind of
Yeah.
alternative,
Mm.
but an alternate home where you can literally pack your bags and go and stay for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, has now become no longer a luxury, but it's become a requirement. It's become a reality to some set of people who can afford one. Obviously, everybody has their own pockets, everybody has budgets.
Yes.
Some people can afford to buy one home, some people can afford to buy more than one. But for people who can afford to buy, I think an alternate home somewhere away from the maddening chaos of the city became another very big concept that was given birth to almost as a child in the pandemic. So these two things kind of stood out for me as very, very strong markers the pandemic that one saw. And the third, and very briefly I'll touch upon that, is that everybody who could afford wanted to have his own ceiling or roof on top of his head. So everybody who could afford said that, can I have my own little place? And you see this across this is across all segments, whether it is luxury, super luxury, uber luxury, whether it is premium, whether it cuts across all geographies, whether north, south, east, west, central India, and it cuts across all market tiers. So whether it's a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, that kind of a requirement is being visible almost everywhere. So everybody who can afford wants to now have an added roof of their own over their heads. So these three things for me really kind of stood out as impact of the pandemic specific to the real estate sector.
Right. So, taking cue from this answer, while I do agree that consumers generally shift towards or incline towards a more trusted brand, it was very recently found in a study that due to the pandemic, consumer loyalty is being shifted and they're more open to experimentation. So, perhaps housing industry has also been in the news for a bit of the wrong reason. Or cumulative of all this, how can the real estate brands, or the marketeers can regain the lost trust and loyalty, especially after this pandemic?
So, see the way. So I don't know which study you're referring to. I'm sure you're referring to a study you're more than comfortable with. So I will not contest what you're saying, but I will try and recontextualize that if I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I think experimentation and flirting with new brands has always been the norm, and people like to experiment with and flirt with a new set of brands every once in a while. However, it's not the same across all industries and all sectors and all categories. And it is especially dependent on whether your ticket value is low enough to experiment and to take a chance on a bad deal, or your ticket value is high enough for you to not want to experiment and not expose yourself to a risk of a bad deal, right? So I think when you make these very big decisions in life for some of these purchases, and owning your own home is one of your biggest purchases that you make in your entire life, right? I think the I think the second biggest expense that you would make on an asset acquisition is probably going to be a car, because a car is the other big expense ticket, asset that you acquire. But home is many x the value of the car that you buy. I think at that point of time, what you want to invariably bank on is somebody who has the legacy and the credibility of delivery.
Right.
And to that extent, I think the way we've seen it play it out for ourselves, our new sales bookings last year's quoted number was roughly around 3,000 odd crores. It was a 24% year-on-year growth from what for the current financial year. Again, looking at a 30% kind of a growth on that number, and we're looking at a average of 1,000 crore a quarter, 4,000 crore for the year, kind of a number coming from our business. So we've in fact ridden that wave fairly well, and we've not really seen a loss of customer confidence in the brand at all. If anything, I think over the last year and a half, advocacy and referrals from our existing customers has given us a whole lot of new business. So our customer acquisition cost actually has reduced at an aggregate level because of how well our current customers, our current owners and residents have spoken well about us, and they referred us to their family. So in some sectors there might have been a greater amount of play and experimentation. I don't think that's necessarily the case with real estate, and that's certainly not the case with us as a brand, because as I told you, when you want to invest in something like this with this high kind of a ticket value, you ideally want to look at something that you can depend on, you can rely on, you can trust on. For I think the real estate sector, in my mind, should be viewed from that particular lens.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Karan, you just pointed that there has been an accelerated demand for bigger spaces, second homes, in sustainable living environment, and wellness-conscious lifestyle. How did you, as a brand, rethink your marketing strategies and cater to these demands?
See, the one thing that you must do in times of a crisis and in times of a pandemic is you must try and heighten your levels of engagement as much as you can. Right? Because as I said earlier, this is the single biggest purchase decision that you will make. People end up spending more when they invest in a home than, for that matter, even when they invest in gold, or an automobile. So your involvement levels and your apprehension levels of your customers are very, very high. Yeah. The only way of dealing with that has to be that you engage, you talk more transparently, more honestly, more frequently, not giving prefabricated standard kind of responses, but responses which are specific to individual queries, responses which are individual to specific apprehensions and questions that people have, right? So more conversation, more engagement, more customized, more personalized interactions, I think, is the starting point. Because if that doesn't happen, then this one-size-fit-all kind of communication and advertising doesn't really take you too far.
Right.
That's been my core learning out of all of this. How do you do this? Multiple ways of doing this. But one of the multiple ways of doing this is going through a very, very strong social and digital charter. Because if anything, social and digital are platforms that help you have two-way conversations, right? When I do a newspaper ad, and I do a newspaper ad once every while, but it is a one-sided conversation. I'm just
True.
here giving you information. I'm
True.
not
True.
opening up a window for you to talk to me. Now I
True.
want you to talk to me. I want you to have a conversation with me. I want you to be honest with me and tell me what your apprehension is, and I want to answer that apprehension or take care of that apprehension. So I think digital platforms play a very important role. As a brand, uh, I've mentioned this earlier, I'll mention this again. You need to have an extremely high degree of empathy, and you need to do everything that you can do to build trust, to strengthen on the current trust that you have, to deliver on the current trust that you have. You should always undercommit, you should always over deliver. There should be no hyperbole in your marketing or any kind of communication spiels at all, because you want to be absolutely truthful about what you want to commit and what the end consumer is going to get, right? So for me, a combination of that approach on the back of a very, very strong digital platform is important. And digital platforms can begin with social media, but they don't have to end with social media, right? All digital platforms have their own place in the sun, starting with your websites, starting to your lead management systems, starting with your training systems, starting with how you do video calls with your
Yeah.
customers, with your internal customers, with your trade marketing, your channel partners. All of that is part of my digital ecosystem, and not just social media, because a lot of people invariably, unfortunately, bring down digital interactions only to social media campaigns. Yes, social media campaigns is an important part of it, but social media campaign is certainly not the only part of it.
So, what about this super luxury real estate market? We understand it's picking up. Perhaps it's not a very massive product. So, how are marketers or
Yeah.
you in that context selling such a niche super luxury product?
See, given the diversity of our country, given the economic and social fabric of our country, I strongly believe that there is a customer for every kind of product at every kind of price point. Some of those price points may exist in a market where the size of the pie may be relatively smaller than the size of the pie in a slightly more mass appeal kind of a product, but there is a customer that is there
Right.
everywhere. I think especially when it comes to super luxury, what you need to ensure is that your entire product marketing approach needs to be very carefully and very consciously customized to what your consumer is looking for. Because in super luxury, the customer is not looking for necessarily four walls of how your house or your box has been constructed. He or she has a lot of expectations which are beyond just the construction of the four walls. What kind of life will I lead? What kind of neighbors will I have? What will my everyday lifestyle look like? Who are the people I'll be rubbing shoulders with? How convenient can my life become from the point of view of living, working, and having leisure in my immediate ecosystem? I think all of those things are an extremely integral part. And then, of course, there are aspects of safety, security, amenities, services that are made available to people, in super luxury kind of product condominiums. So I think the approach there needs to be a supremely handcrafted, almost a bespoke marketing, almost kind of an approach where you're speaking to one consumer, one customer at a time, one prospect at a time, trying to very deeply understand what the motivations are, what the triggers are, what is this person seeking, and then try and, in a very honest manner, put forth your product and say that, listen, these are the kind of things that this product can deliver on. These are the kind of things this product may not deliver on. And the choice is completely up to you, because, there is, honestly speaking, there is no one ideal product that exists in the world, right? There are trade-offs everywhere. So I think pandemic or no pandemic, that is the way how luxury needs to be dealt with. That is the way how super luxury needs to be dealt with. One product and one customer at a time, having the deepest conversations in trying to understand the motivations behind the purchase and the aspects and the attributes that your product can deliver.
Okay, so my last question for today is Proptech, we all know, is changing the way real estate is working. Even campaigns of the government are making access of technology easier and more holistic. So, how is technology revolutionizing the real estate industry according to you?
Increasingly, what you're seeing is that on repetitive tasks that are simple and are easy to repeat. I think technology is coming in and making it more efficient. On tasks which are not repetitive, I think technology is coming in and helping you do multi-level scenario building and option development. So I think either whether you look at it from an architecture point of view, whether you look at it from a design point of view, whether you look at it from an execution point of view, you have a much greater interplay of technology today visible to everyone across sectors, I suspect. With or without the pandemic, honestly, that aspect has not really been impacted by the pandemic. But there is a whole lot of technology infusion in real estate as well, from every stage of planning to every stage of execution. Uh, a whole lot of technology is lending itself in the form of software applications, as well as also in the form of technical inputs that go towards automating various processes.
Yeah.
And each sector will have their own ways of how they utilize it. Real estate is certainly utilizing it in a very, very effective manner as a sector itself.
Right. So this was all for today. I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope the audiences will have a lot of takeaways from this interview. Thank you.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure, and look forward to connecting with you and your audiences again.